Tervetuloa. Minä olen Janne Riiheläinen ja juonnan tämän seuraavan noin puolituntisen, jossa pääsemme kuulemaan Venäjän vakoojaverkosto kirjan kirjoittaja Luke Hardingin ajatuksia siitä, että miten kirja syntyy ja mitä siinä on. Ja ehkä vähän lopussa käymme läpi sitä, että mitä hän ajattelee, että tästä kaikesta seuraa ja mikä on tulevaisuus. Luke, welcome.
Thank you. Warm greetings from London to Finland.
Yeah, you're a bit like Finnish because we are the people who drink most coffee in the world per capita. Did you know that?
I knew you were a wonderful and exceptional nation, but this is a new fact for me.
Yeah. This is one thing, but we are kind of proud of ourselves too. But congratulations, your book is a hit in Finland.
Well, thank you. Yes, I saw a good friend of mine who works for Helsingin Sanomat sent me a photo from the bookshop with Shadow State, or Russian Spy Network, to give it its Finnish name, is #1 in nonfiction in Finland, and I'm thrilled. I mean, I'm glad it's found an audience, it's found a readership. I think it's, or at least I hope it's the kind of right book at the right moment. If that makes sense. It's come out at a time where Russia, as ever, is playing a huge role in international politics, and also, of course, is a source of strategic concern for you guys, since it's the country on the doorstep.
Yeah, how's the book been in other countries? We took it very well. How has been it in other European or in Northern America?
Yeah, I mean, it came out in the US and the UK at the same time. It's done better in the UK. I mean, I think it sort of played in a little bit to the kind of political conversation here over Brexit, and in particular the chapter called Moscow Gold, about what the Russians did and didn't do around the 2016 European referendum, which saw, to my mind, the UK exit the EU disastrously. And what I did, using my own sources and other information, was to try and give a definitive account, so best as we know it, of the Kremlin campaign in 2016, which took place at the same time that there was a big espionage operation in America to help Donald Trump win. Now, in the US, we've had Robert Mueller, we've had the Senate Intelligence Committee report from last year, we've had heat and noise and light and so on. And in the UK, we've had basically silence from Theresa May and from Boris Johnson, who do not want to suggest that the Russians played any role in Brexit, and have refused to interrogate this. So in the UK, it found a big resonance. In the US, I think not so much. But I hope it's an important book. I think it's a timely book, and Vladimir Putin is not going anywhere, is he?
So. No, he's not. Well, when he goes when he wants to go. But let's see, because he's riding the tiger, and riding tiger is hard. But it's even hard not to ride anymore, to come down from the tiger. So.
Well, especially if you come off the tiger, then the tiger will eat you, and that's the logic of his situation. That's why we've had this referendum recently saying he can stay in power until 2036. Yeah. Is that if you look at kind of contemporary Russia, 30 years after the USSR, there are sort of two projects going on. I think one is the noisy, patriotic, sort of hyper, I would say, nationalist project to make Russia great again. And it's a KGB world where Russia is surrounded by enemies, and Finland is in a kind of gray zone where it's a kind of regarded as a sort of home territory, you might say. But also there's this private project to steal and control state resources, which has seen Putin and his circle from St. Petersburg, from Leningrad, become hugely rich, multi-billionaires. And the consequence of that is that were Putin ever to step down, there would be an enormous struggle for these resources, for huge amounts of money, and therefore he can't. He's a sort of prisoner of his destiny, if you like. He has to stay there in the Kremlin, forever, even when he's on a Zimmer frame.
Yeah, and guess what? We know that here in Finland.
It's your problem.
Yeah, it is, and it's always one thing. But when I was reading this book, it was kind of time machine, which took me back something like 5 or 6 years, what I've been reading in newspapers, what I've been reading in Twitter and other places. It's all these happenings, global happenings, which are here and there, and these persons and these, everything kind of came together as a story, and there were huge amount of people there, huge amount of details. How did you do that?
Well, I mean, it's, you know, as the Americans say, it's not my first rodeo. I've written 7 or 8 nonfiction books now. I've written about a book about Edward Snowden, the Snowden Files, which got made into a movie by Oliver Stone. I wrote a book about Alexander Litvinenko, also published in Finnish, called A Very Expensive Poison, which was made into a award-winning play in London at the Old Vic Theatre, which played to full houses just before the pandemic hit. And I guess what I would say is that you know, everything I write is true. It's non-fiction, it's not fiction, but I try and kind of borrow the techniques from novel writing and almost from cinema, you might say, to give a picture so you can feel, you can see, you can understand. Because actually, deep down, these huge geopolitical stories, whether it's Donald Trump, whether it's Brexit, whether it's Finnish politicians, ultimately it's a human drama. It's about individuals, you know, and there are some lovely moments in the book. I particularly like the story of the GRU spy, Mironov, who is hacking all the time, and he can't get a girlfriend. And so, you know, by day, he is roaming around Holland or Europe or Malaysia, hacking servers, stealing information on behalf of the Russian state. But at the weekend, he's surfing the internet to see if he can find a girlfriend. And I sort of think, you know, we always sort of see this as kind of high spy drama. It is, but ultimately the people involved, even the Salisbury assassins, who I begin my book with them, the Skripal poisoning, yes, they are killers. Yes, they are professional murderers working on behalf of the state, but also remarkably, they are fathers. They have small children. They have wives, I guess, who love them. And it's this dichotomy between murderous purpose and kind of ordinary human reality, which I try and explore.
Yes, because this I think some message of this book was also, we are all humans. We have similar kind of needs and what we want to do, even if we are international assassinations. So it's kind of, it was in a way that how you told the story, it somehow it came alive. It was kind of a season 6 of some, I don't know what kind of TV show it would be, but in a way. And that is also one thing what I've been thinking a lot. How are we going to see after 20 years, 30 years, this part of history? And I think you may have kind of, you have said your word about this. You have kind of draw the picture of this time, from this particular theme, how these certain kind of powers are using all kind of tricks and things that they are trying to get their way. How do you think? Is this going to be what is remembered from these times?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really interesting question, because you look at the history and certain trends are clear, that we live in an age of populism, that we live in an age of politicians who lie in a way that perhaps was not possible from our childhood, you know, from the kind of post-war years. I'm 53, but I can't imagine 10, 20 years ago a politician like Boris Johnson becoming prime minister.
Yeah, they were just boring people.
They were kind of boring.
Yeah,
they
but
were managerial, and
yeah.
Now we live in a more flamboyant age and a darker age. And I think one of the problems is that it's become almost a battle of storytelling, you know, and this is something that the Russian state understands perfectly, and Putin understands perfectly. He thinks truth is for losers. You know, you Finns interested in truth, you know, go stuff yourselves. We're not interested in truth. What we're interested in narrative. And, you know, Russia's narrative for its domestic population is it's a strong sovereign state standing up for conservative values, orthodoxy with an O, big O, traditional family, and so on. And some people in the West like this idea. It's basically a kind of far right ideology, essentially. And you see a similar playbook being used in Trump's America, in Bolsonaro's Brazil, in Modi's India. It's an age of populists and demagogues. And I sort of think what we need to do, but by which I mean, people who are democratic, who are progressive, who are plural, who believe in truth rather than narrative, is find a way of telling stories which are equally persuasive, that are true, factually true, but also move people in the same way. And I think this is the huge problem for the left in Europe. The left is in the state of disarray, including in my country, is what is the answer to this kind of assertive, noisy, right-wing populism? And,
Yes.
and whichever politician can get that answer, it's like a magic elixir. You can bottle that and send it around the world.
And you tell us about how Putin's Russia is using democratic values and democratic laws and order against itself, putting out these narratives, using people's right to travel and all these kind of international organizations, and they are just tools for them to use against us.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting is that there are plenty of echoes and comparisons with the Cold War, and Vladimir Putin himself is what you might call Homo Sovieticus. I mean, he's absolutely his paranoid worldview is absolutely a kind of KGB view. But I think the sort of KGB playbook of influence, of active measures, of trying to subvert and undermine Western society is still there, but it's been subtly updated. And back in the 60s and 70s and 80s, for example, the emphasis was on it's still the same, preventing Finland, for example, from joining NATO, but stealing plans of nuclear weapons silos, of tank divisions in West Germany, etc. It was military technical secrets. And now what Putin has realized very well, smartly, is that forget about that. That's quite difficult. Much easier to influence the West through the soft underbelly of its politics, because we live in open societies. Anyone in Finland can join politics and stand for election and so on. It's an open place. So you try and subvert politics by hiring politicians, wooing politicians, maybe sometimes blackmailing politicians. And the goal, I think, his strategic goal in Europe is to smash the sort of moderate center and to undermine the European Union. And what I try and do in Shadow State, the English title of my book, is show that this isn't a story. The story of our times is not just about faraway bad guys in Moscow or Vladivostok or Sochi doing bad things. Ultimately, it's the story of our corruption. The fact there are plenty of people in my country, in Finland, in Germany, who are willing to work on behalf of Russian interests, Kremlin interests, wittingly or unwittingly, as lawyers, real estate guys, PR guys, and also retired politicians. The Moscow very, very good at hiring retired politicians who are feeling a little bit underloved, who would like to top up their pensions, and who will join the board of Russian companies, go to Moscow twice a year, etc.
Yeah, that's we know that too. We with our own experience.
I write about this in Shadow State. Several ex-Finnish politicians are on, or Finnish ex-politicians are on the payroll.
Yeah, and what we've been seeing now in few days in Afghanistan is kind of telling this kind of a ultimate story, what is happening when the society collapses from inside. So nobody is fighting for freedom, nobody is fighting for their own good, but nobody trusts nobody. This is what's happening. These ones who are willing to be strong are taking over.
Yeah. I mean, and also I reported from the last war, the war in Afghanistan. I reported for The Guardian. I met the Taliban in 2000 when they were in power last time in Kabul, and then did the war in Kabul. I was in Mazar-e Sharif. I saw the Taliban surrender in the desert, And I'm amazed that this has happened, and I do think it's a major foreign policy geostrategic crisis for the West, for America, and the UK in particular. And it's a moment of triumph and rejoicing and some mocking laughter, I would say, for the Russians and the Chinese, because the Russian view is all of this talk about liberal values, human rights. It's nothing. It's just empty words, and the reality is that we live in a place where great powers compete, have spheres of interest, and they decide the future of nations, the future of peoples, and so on. And the US appears to be in retreat at the moment, and it's very hard to it's very hard to not to sort of sympathize with people in Kabul, friends of mine who now are going to be living under Taliban rule, under an Islamic Emirate. So I think it's a major crisis, and I think for Moscow it's an opportunity. And I note that today there are talks going on between Russia and the Taliban.
Yes,
and of course, Russian diplomats did not leave Kabul.
Yeah.
The Americans, the Brits, the Finns, I imagine, they're all running as fast as their legs will take them.
At least trying to get out.
Get out. The Russians are staying.
Yeah, and Chinese, because I think
Chinese staying too.
Chinese and Russians will be strong in Afghanistan right now. And there's been some signs also that this GRU guys, which are also a big part of your book, have also being somehow connected to Taliban too. So maybe they have some part of this collapse we just saw, because it's not just happening. You had to do long time work and all different kind of things that you get this kind of result.
No, I mean, I think that's right. I mean, it's quite interesting, the story I think the New York Times wrote, citing American intelligence officials, that the GRU had been active in Afghanistan, paying Taliban to try and kill Americans. Now I don't know if it's true. I have not verified this story. These are not my sources, but it seems to me it's plausible, because another thing I try and explain in my book is just the thinking of Putin and the people around him, sitting around the National Security Council. They're all hawks. There are no doves at the moment. There may have been 15, 20 years ago, but they've gone. They're all hawks, and they share a similar worldview, which is that Russia essentially is fighting a kind of endless, I would call it a kind of quasi-war, not quite war, with the Western world, and this is a sort of existential struggle. And once you understand that, you understand what the GRU has been doing recently across the territory of Europe, sending killers to Salisbury, to England, murdering exiles, Chechen exiles in the park in Berlin, blowing up arms factories, depots in Czechoslovakia, poisoning arms dealers in Bulgaria, and so on. This is warlike stuff, but it's not happening in the 1940s. It's happening now in the 21st century.
And in a way, I think it's one of the most depressing things about this is that this kind of behavior makes sense for them, because I think not all, but many think that if they want to survive and if they want to be big empire, they need to use these kind of tricks, using violence, because that's kind of their only power. They don't have much soft power, they don't have much economical power, they don't have much political power, but they have power of violence.
Yeah, they believe, I'm talking about the Kremlin again, the Kremlin leadership, they believe in forced solutions, and their view, as you say, is essentially imperial or neo-imperial, and that, I think, to a large extent explains what we've seen in Ukraine. I reported that too for The Guardian. Some of this is in the book. The annexation of Crimea, the war in the east of Ukraine, which only happened because Russia wanted it to happen. And I think this imperial view touches Finland, because there's very much a view in Moscow that the countries of the former Soviet Union, former Soviet republics like Ukraine, like Georgia, Azerbaijan, even to some extent the Baltic states, that they are sub-sovereign. They're not really fully sovereign entities, and that Russia has the right, like a big brother, to determine not everything but security and foreign policy choices. So, for example, whether a country like Ukraine would join NATO or Georgia, and I reported also on the war in Georgia in 2008, which I think was done to a large degree to stop Georgia from joining NATO. And this concerns Finland because I don't think Russia sees Finland as being sub-sovereign, but I do think that it regards Helsinki as within its sphere of influence. And were, for example, Finland to join NATO or to start behaving in a hostile way towards Russia as Russia sees it, then I think Russia would intervene, not necessarily militarily. I'm not talking about tanks across the border, but would step up attempts to subvert Finnish society and Finnish politics, would do further cyber hacking and so on. So you guys are on the front line. I mean, I think most people in Finland understand that, but it's a real challenge for foreign policy thinkers, for think tanks in Helsinki. How do you respond to an aggressive, revisionist Russia that is insecure and I would say implacably hostile?
Yes, and this is one thing that comes from our histories. During Cold War time, we had this Finlandisierung, so this Finlandization, and in a way, it was much of it was very pragmatic kind of thing, and then there were some which was totally like overkill and very shameful place where played that time. But we what we learned that we don't. In Finnish tradition, we never called bear by its name. We don't say bear. We have some other words for them because bear is hearing us and it's coming to us. It's a bit same thing with Russia. We are kind of I'm this kind of a free person. I'm not part of any party. I'm not politician. I'm not researcher. I'm not government official. I'm not anything. I can say what I want, but especially when you're part of some organization, it's kind of a you are very careful what you say about, especially about Russia. We are saying the things, but we are saying it in a very mild way, and then we use like your book in a way that okay, this is the guy who's saying this straightforward, how things are, and we like it, but we are still kind of very very polite and not saying kind of diplomatic against Russia because it's kind of pragmatic thing also.
Yeah, no, and right, and clearly people are pragmatically buying the book. In other words, you're right. Maybe I articulate something it's easier to do from London than from Helsinki. And I think what's interesting too is that how people think. I mean, in Germany, for example, there's a very strong kind of pro-Kremlin lobby, especially from business, and there is a sense of there's a sort of romanticization about Russia, and there's a sense of guilt because of the Second World War, which I think still plays a role in kind of contemporary German politics and German-Russian relations. In the UK, by contrast, we're kind of conditioned by James Bond, by the thrillers of Ian Fleming, but also by the recent murder, of Alexander Litvinenko in 2006 and the Skripal poisoning. Everybody understands that Russia wishes the UK nothing good, and that these crazy spy plots, which seem to have come from the 20th century, could happen again. The Russian espionage is still, Russian spies are very active in Britain, and I think in Finland as well. Whether you acknowledge them or call it out, Helsinki is a really important hub for SVR foreign intelligence, for GRU military intelligence. And I would be surprised if the number of active Russian spies in Finland is smaller than in Cold War times. My sense is the number is probably bigger.
Yeah, we got big embassy here in Tehtaankatu, so street called where the embassy is. Few words about one thing that was about what happened in Finland in your book was this Trump and Putin in their press conference. That was really something.
I love writing that chapter about Trump's visit to Helsinki because I have lots of Finnish friends, and I came over to Helsinki and talked to them, and I did a kind of Trump Putin tourism trail. I know this sounds stupid, but I went to the harborside sort of President's Palace where they met, and stomped up and down and looked at the view and got some kind of local color, had a beer, etc. I mean, the thing is, it was a crazy, surreal fever dream of a presidency, the 4 years of Donald J. Trump, where you'd wake up in the morning not knowing what the hell was going on, what he had tweeted overnight. It was like living in some sort of over colorful phantasmagoria. But having said all that, the one consistent theme of his presidency was, to be colloquial, sucking up to Vladimir Putin. And the Helsinki summit was the greatest example of that, where they met, where Putin said, I wasn't in the room, no one was in the room, but basically said, Donald, you can trust me, I am your brother, I am your rock, I will defend you, we in Russia esteem you as a great businessman, as a leader of genius, etc. This kind of primitive KGB flattery, and it worked. It worked with Donald Trump. Trump comes out, is asked about hacking, about the multi-layered campaign by the Russians to help Donald Trump win the election in 2016. And he says, Vladimir has given me these very strong assurances, and I don't think anything happened. And it was one of those historical, where you were in the room when you heard that, moments where you just think, oh my God, did he really say that? Yeah, he really did say that.
I was tweeting about that okay, Putin just put Trump's head to the toilet and flushed it, and then afterwards Trump thanked him.
Yeah. I mean, flushed it twice. I mean, it was astonishing, and I sort of think, when historians look back with more sober distance at the period, that will be the kind of key moment where in public you repudiate your own spy agencies, American spy agencies, and side with someone who essentially is a dictator, but also someone who lies professionally, has been lying throughout his entire career, and you believe him, you choose to believe him for reasons of naivety or survival or delusion. I don't know. I'm not a psychologist, but it was an astonishing moment, and it was a joy to write that chapter.
Yeah, and if I'm not any fortune teller, but I can say that there are many things to write also in the future. Are you going to? What's next? What is Luke Hardingin going to write next? What's the book? Do you know? Do you have ideas?
I mean, I do have ideas. I can't say anything at the moment because it's all a bit secret. But I mean, I'm kind of torn, to be honest. Part of me thinks, look, I've got to write about something else. I mean, I wasn't planning to write Shadow State, and then the Skripal poisoning happened, and I just thought this story is just so extraordinary. I have to write this. And also, I'd been making these discoveries about Brexit and Russia and the Wagner Group as well. The activities of these Russian mercenaries in Africa, and also Bellingcat. The rise of Bellingcat, and the fact that, really interesting, the idea that spying is no longer done by nation states. It's not just done by Finnish intelligence or British intelligence. It's done by a load of geeks sitting in a basement,
and
with an internet connection. And in some ways, they're better than the spies. They're actually quicker, they're faster, and there's so much sort of public source material out there which can be used. So I was trying to kind of capture our multitudinous, fast-changing world and to write it. So, what the next project will be, I can't say for now, but I hope there will be another project.
I bet you don't. There are topics. A lot of topics are coming out of there, and this is also, that was one thing in your book what was really kind of enjoyable. There were these big, huge kind of GRU and other these power centers and so on. But then there are these guys who are just kind of going with their computers and getting it all out. Like Bellingcat is like enemy number one, I think, for many Russians in their intelligence services.
Yeah, and Elliot Higgins, I've interviewed him a few times, and I reviewed his book for the Observer, the Guardian sister paper, and he really is a geek. He's a sort of classic nerd. He'd grown a beard during lockdown, and he's just someone who spend 16 hours a day in front of his laptop, and when he was a teenager had very few social skills, and he found his moment. He had an idea, which is open source material is more useful very often than private stuff, than state secrets. And he went with that idea, and now he has created the most formidable reporting organization, I think, in the world, pretty much. Certainly doing different stuff from the Guardian or the New York Times or Helsingin Sanomat, but really just terrific.
One last question this is about Elliot Higgins. This is about you. This is even about me, maybe too. What is the power of getting all this stuff out on public?
Well, I mean, that's a kind of interesting question, because for example, I was part of the team that in 2016 published Panama Papers, this huge leak of 10 million offshore documents, which revealed, that the rich basically don't pay tax, the multinational corporations don't pay tax, the Prime Minister of Iceland had to resign, David Cameron almost quit, etc. And we thought we would publish this material. There would be reforms, there would be protests, the world would be cleaned up, these offshore guys would go bust. And they didn't. They didn't. Everyone moved on, people forgot, the offshore people just got a bit smarter about how they did their business. And the political impact in the end of the day was fairly small. But I don't think we should be defeatists. I think we as writers, as publishers, as journalists, as citizens, as Democrats, that we have to keep going, and we have to, if there's interesting information, we have to push it out there, we have to read it, we have to interrogate it, sift it. And that, at a time when politics has kind of failed, I wouldn't say completely, but a lot of Western politics is in a bad place at the moment, that it's down to Bellingcat, citizen investigators, journalists, writers, novelists, community activists, eco-campaigners to try and fill that space, to fill that gap, and to keep having a kind of sensible, fact-grounded conversation, a bit like this one, where
Yes.
we're respectful, we're in different countries, but we're still striving for truth rather than for noise and counterfactual information, etc.
Democracy eats truth, because if it doesn't get the truth, if there is no correct information, we can't make decisions which are good for us. And in a way, this is how we get this information, through your books, through these conversations, and so on.
We need good books, we need good stories, good storytelling, and we need facts, we need empiricism, we need a kind of second enlightenment almost. The last one was 300 years ago. It's time for another enlightenment to my mind, because otherwise you can't have good science. You have the rise of anti-vaxxers, you can't have good politics, you can't have good international relations or human rights, and so on. So it all begins with stories, true stories, but well-told stories, and that's what I hope I do with Shadow State.
Yeah, you did that with your book. So, and I thank you, and I tell you that we are waiting for your next book, and whatever it is, no pressure. But it's been really delightful moment to talk with you with these important things, and let's move on, and let's do this thing what we are doing over and over again, and because we need to.
Yeah, thank you, and I'd love to do it next time over a beer in Helsinki. Would be great if such a thing becomes possible again.
Okay, so I hope you have you have still summer there. Our autumn is almost here, but I hope you have a nice summer, and your summer is continuing. And I thank you, and let's see you sometimes when this Corona is over.
Great, thank you. Okay, my best to you in Finland. Okay, thanks. Bye.
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 Kiitoksia kaikille. Tämä oli siis Luke Harding ja Venäjän vakoojaverkostokirja, ja katsotaan, mitä hän seuraavaksi kirjoittaa. Ei kertonut vielä, mutta sanotaanko näin, että sillä välin näissä hänen aikaisemmissa kirjoissaankin kyllä riittää lukemista. Kiitoksia minunkin puolestani, oikein mukavaa päivänjatkoa. Minä olen Janne Riiheläinen ja tämä oli Luke Hardingin ja Venäjän vakoojaverkosto. Kiitos.